Every single one of those pictures was taken with this very Canon Powershot A1400 digicam. This little camera feels really nice in the hand. In fact, with the AA batteries installed, it only weighs 6 ounces. It's super easy to slide it into your pocket. In fact, I would say this camera size is good for most people. If you have smaller hands, this would be a really good option for you for point and shoot photography. This camera was released by Canon in 2013. The A1300 cosmetically and shooting wise is very similar to the A1400. So this review and how to shoot is gonna work for almost all of those Canon Powershot A series models. And the menu is almost identical. I bought this camera used on eBay for about $50. Depending on condition, I've seen them anywhere from $5 at your local Goodwill or thrift store up to $100 to $125 mint in box. Now, if you're able to find it from a family member or a friend and get it for free, or if you happen to just have one of these just sitting in a closet somewhere and you can use it, score. I think you'll have a really good time shooting this camera. So getting into the features of the Canon Powershot A1400. It's a 16 megapixel camera with a 5x optical zoom. It'll be 5x better than any cell phone camera. So it gives you a little bit added range for a little bit of zoom shooting. Now that's the equivalent of up to 140 millimeter if you're using a standard camera lens. So it does give you a little bit of range. The downside is when you zoom out with this camera to full extent, if you're trying to track a face or get something in focus from that range, it can take a little bit longer for the autofocus to work. This camera does shoot 720p video at 30 frames per second, but the microphone is really tiny, very, very small, and the audio quality is gonna sound kind of tinny and not great. I'm gonna show a clip up here on the screen of a video that I took without a tripod. Here we are just walking around, handheld. One of the main features that I really like of the Canon PowerShot A1400 and A1300 is that it has this tiny built-in viewfinder. This is almost a must if you're shooting outdoors with this camera, because when you have the camera turned on and there's a lot of glare, it can be really, really challenging to see the LCD screen. So what I like to do is, generally when I'm using this camera and taking pictures outside, I'll go ahead and use the optical viewfinder. It allows you to make sure that the image that you're shooting in question is centered on the screen and that you result in getting the best picture possible. And it has face tracking in auto mode, so you're actually able to make sure that if you're taking pictures of people, and then sometimes actually it works with pets as well, that they're in focus. One of the things that I've noticed with shooting with this Canon PowerShot A1400 many times throughout the years is that it has a bit of a hard time shooting in lower light conditions. So it does have a built-in flash, which is right here. And if you utilize that flash, particularly when you're shooting indoors or in lower light situations, it's able to illuminate the subject up to like 10 to 14 feet away. And it does a pretty good job, but particularly in darker situations or at night, it's really gonna give you that flashlight effect where most of the focus and the light is centered right at the subject and everything else is gonna be kind of washed out and darker. The flash takes a little while to cycle between shots. So even if, say outdoors with natural light, you're able to take quite a few consecutive pictures, which you are perfectly fine with this camera, it does cycle a little bit in between the flash, so it's gonna take a little bit of extra time. So if you're trying to take multiple pictures very quickly with this camera in lower light situations, it's gonna be a bit of a challenge. In the settings menu of this camera, you're actually able to adjust the aspect ratio of the pictures that you're taking. You can go from 16:9 to 4:3. You can set your ISO speed here, which is nice. There is not a way to record to RAW, as far as I'm aware, utilizing this camera without using like software embedded in an SD card. Self-timer, focus range, drive mode. If you wanted to, for whatever reason, use a smaller size picture, you can go down as low as a 0.3 megapixel. Interesting. Now, if you need to do a full camera reset on this, you just go to the settings menu, which is in the menu on the lower right here. Scroll over to the settings, and then scroll to the top, or scroll all the way to the bottom, and there's a reset all button. Click that. and then click OK. And it'll set the settings back to the way they were on the box, which is kind of handy. To shoot movie mode, all I have to do is, in any mode, just click that red button, and it starts shooting, all in auto. You can move the lens in and out like I'm doing here, up to the 4x optical zoom. Not on a tripod here, so there's going to be a little bit of shake. Stop the recording there. So it makes it actually fairly seamless to go from shooting video to almost instantly shooting a short movie clip in up to 720p. Digital zoom, I would always set that to off. Digital zoom is generally not your friend. AF autofocus point zoom, I have that set to off. Servo AF, you can set that to on and off here. Red eye correction if you're having issues with red eyes in pictures. Review image after shooting. So after you shoot a picture, which I'll do here right now, it'll show for just a little bit, a second, and then fade away. If you wanted to revise that to either not show or show for a longer period of time, you can do so there. Set to off if you wanted to go on. Now when I go back, there I've got the 9 separate blocks. If you're trying to get something or specific things in a frame, it'll show there. To review your videos, all you have to do is click the play button down here, and all of your photos and videos will show up. To adjust the flash settings, that's what this button here is on the right. Out of the box is going to set to auto. If you always want the fill flash to fire, that's what the always on will do. Now you can adjust it in the menu too, but I'm going to go back. If you never want the flash to fire, you can set it there. If you're shooting indoors without a flash, you're oftentimes going to have some blur because of the variable lighting conditions. Natural light, I'll repeat it again, is generally this camera's best friend. Unless you're going after that kind of artistic blur. If you only want to use the viewfinder and save on battery life without reviewing images all the time, you can hit display. So now it's on. Now it's off. That's going to save a lot of battery life if you're shooting a lot of pictures. The batteries that I use for this camera, I really like Amazon's AA batteries. I buy them in large quantity. I think you get as small as a couple dozen to as large as a 300 pack. And normally I buy the 300 pack. And it works out to about 20 cents a battery. So using the Canon Powershot A1400 camera will cost you 40 cents for a few hundred pictures. Now, this camera will accept rechargeable AA batteries if you have those. And those are handy because you don't have to throw them away when you're done. You can just recharge them. A little more expensive out of the gate, but worth in the long run if you use it quite a bit. The memory card that I'm using in this camera is a 32 gig SD card, which holds a few thousand pictures. I've used as small as like a 64 megabyte card, which will hold a couple dozen pictures tops, depending on the resolution that you're filming in. It does not use a micro SD cable like this, like you see with a lot of electronics these days. It uses the older A male to mini B, which looks like this. Open up the side port here, and then put your cable in here, like so. And then plug it into the computer, and then you're good to go. I want to go over a few issues that may prevent the camera from shooting properly, if you do find it in a used condition. I've been buying and selling cameras now full-time for the last 6 years, and as such I've seen a lot of Canon Powershot A1400s. There's 3 common issues that I see with this camera most often in used condition. Number 1, what I see most often is battery corrosion. So battery corrosion is pretty easy to spot. If you open the battery door compartment to this Canon Powershot A1400, you will see green oxidization or blue acid residue from a battery that leaked or exploded while it was stored inside of the camera. It's very, very common with electronics or anything with AA batteries or AAA batteries that's been stored for a longer period of time. If the corrosion is so bad that it's eaten away the metal posts inside of the camera, it may not be fixable. Perhaps a little bit of cleaning may fix the job and get rid of the corrosion, particularly if it's on the outer battery door area. You should check out a video that I have posted on how to fix a AA camera. I'll link the video down below. It really is a very easy process that involves just a wire brush and a little bit of vinegar. And oftentimes, if your camera was not powering on and you go through that process, it just takes a few minutes, you can get it to power on. The number 2 issue that I see with this camera in used condition is that when you power the camera on, instead of the lens opening normally like it did here, it will actually struggle to open, may end up shutting the camera down and saying error. So when that happens, oftentimes there's sand or debris that gets inside of the lens mechanism. So if you're able to, if you have a small little air blower like I have right here, this is a Giotto, there's a lot of brands that make these. These are very handy. Instead of using compressed air, this uses air that comes in from the bottom and shoots air up at the top at pretty good volume. So you can use this little guy to spray air out of the lens area, and if there was a little little bit of debris inside of the camera lens, that may solve the issue and get your camera working normally again. However, it could be a more serious issue where, say, the camera was extended out and it was dropped and it fell on the lens and bent some internal mechanism. That's going to be a more serious issue. And frankly, oftentimes a camera repair store will probably charge you more than what you could get a new camera for. So unfortunately, maybe a lost cause at that point. Number 3 issue that I see with this camera is when you turn the camera on, everything looks to function normally. You zoom out, you take a picture, you think everything's working great. You take the picture, and then you noticed in review or even on the LCD screen that a black speck in every picture that you take. That is common with older digital cameras, and oftentimes what happens is tiny little speck of dust gets inside the internal sensor of the camera, and it will cause a lot of issues for you. Now, I don't do very many actual physical camera repairs. However, there are some tutorials on how to try to fix that yourself. I've tried and failed on more attempts than I can count. And I've gotten shocked more often than I've actually fixed the camera. So I would say if you're highly technologically inclined, then that could be something that you look at. There are some videos on YouTube that go over how to get rid of dust in a sensor.